So here we go, guys. Right, should I sell my stocks before the market crashes? That's the title of the video. Guys, before I get into it, my name's Mark. I'm an entrepreneur and property investor. I also invest in the stock market, so I guess I'm just an investor. Now, this video has all come about due to a conversation I had on one of my consultation calls very recently, where the chap was asking me, should he sell his stock portfolio before the market crashes? He said, I feel like it's already starting to crash. It's down 7, 8, 9% from the highs, and I really think that this might be the time for me to get out of the market. I've made fantastic gains over the last couple of years. I want to maybe crystallize those gains, have it in my bank. So I had a good conversation with him, and after that conversation, he said, you know what, you should put that in a video. You should just put down how you simplified it into the risks, rewards, why might it happen, why might it not happen, and then people can make their own mind up, right, from that conversation. So that's what I'm doing today for you. I'm giving you the benefit of that conversation, and it just gave us a bit of clarity. And I guess from my perspective, I've got, what, £3 million worth of property. The same applies, right? I've had 9.5%, 10% gains over the last year. That's made me nearly £300,000. Should I sell while I'm ahead? But we'll find out in this video, won't we? What's my opinion? What am I going to do? Because I guess if I'm talking through issues and coming to conclusions, and then maybe I would take that on board myself and action what I think's right for me. So as always, you know, this is just opinion. Your investment decisions are all up to you, and that's why on this channel we don't sell a course, we don't do any upsell. So if you haven't already subscribed, why not consider subscribing? And please give this video a big like. It helps me out with the algorithm. I think it gets out to more people when you do, so I really do appreciate it. So this was the question, should I sell before the stock market crashes? And I said, well, let's go through the scenario of why it might crash and what's been going on recently. And he really wanted to talk about two things, and I think there's more. There's always lots of things that we can consider, but the two things he wants to talk about was the war and the inflation. And I think, you know, we could put pandemic in there as well, right? I certainly think that's played into the recent downfall of stocks. You know, Omicron's really taken off, and a lot of companies sold off during that period. So why it might crash, war and inflation, and I think, you know, those are very good points. You know, there's a lot of geopolitical uncertainty around Ukraine at the moment, and Russia and America and Russia and UK relations are definitely at a low. So there's a definite risk of a war, and there's definitely bad words being said, but at the moment there is no war, and at the moment, you know, we would hope clearer heads would prevail. And the second risk is inflation, and I get that. Inflation's running at record rates. Well, record for recent times, not record overall, but record for recent times. And, you know, that really is probably two-pronged. Firstly, we have a supply issue. Secondly, we printed loads of money. We shouldn't be that surprised that we get inflation. But when we printed a lot of money in 2008, what was really interesting is we didn't get much inflation on prices, but we did get asset price inflation. It's interesting that that's not happened this time, and this time round, we've got asset price inflation, and we've got inflation of prices at the pumps, prices at the shops, and all those sorts of things. And do you know what? My personal opinion is that most of the money that's been printed has gone into assets. When we're talking about inflation, oil is up because there's not enough supply. Gas is up because there's not enough supply. We look at wood, it's up because there's not enough supply. These are actually industries that are going to rebound a lot over the next 6 to 12 months. And I believe this inflation may well start to come down naturally, and that this risk might not be as severe as it is. But that's just an opinion, okay? I can't say that for certain. We can just bear all of this in mind. But we played the print loads of money game before, and it didn't happen then. I can't understand why it would happen this time. However, what we have done differently this time is affect all the supply chains. We've shut down countries. We've stopped the supply side of goods and raw materials. So I think inflation is more about that than it is about the money we printed. And if it is, capitalism will take care of it. Capitalism will mean that people will start up, for example, let's just use wood for example. Now let's say for example wood is at a real high price, more people will start producing wood. And you know, more companies will enter the arena, they'll start to drive the price down. So we can look at inflation and go, if it's supply side, generally capitalism's got it, as long as the economy is allowed to function. So for me, the reasons why it might crash, or certainly the reasons why it might crash in terms of what this chap was saying, saying to me, war and inflation, I'm not 100% sure on either of them. I don't think war's really going to happen. And I think inflation may well be short-lived. Now, why would it not crash? And this is the interesting thing, right? Why would we not get that? Well, firstly, what if there's no war? Well, prices will start to go back up. What if inflation reduces? Well, then prices of the assets will continue to go back up. What if wage inflation takes place? So if you've got inflation, you get wage inflation, people can still afford to buy, assets just reprice, everything becomes 10% more expensive, but you earn 10% more. Probably not such a big issue. So there's lots of reasons why it might not crash as well, isn't there? Based around the same themes. That's not even building into the fact that there might not be any of these problems, right? Things sell off and markets reprice all the time. It's not unusual to have a 5-10% drop. In fact, markets generally suffer a 10% drop every year, and they suffer a 20% drop every 3 years. So it's not unusual at all, because people are very, very emotional, and they get emotional about the purchasing and selling of stock. I think the next thing to really consider is what happens if it does crash. Well, the worst thing that happens, really, if you look at the past, is a temporary reduction in asset values. And the key word on here is temporary, because in the whole of history, they've always recovered. And now I know that we'll be able to pick out some examples where it's taken a long time. You could point to 1929 and go, well, that took a long time. I think it was to the 50s to recover. But we've had a new game in town this time. It's called print loads of money. And ultimately, because we've got this new game of print loads of money, the Fed, the Bank of England, the central banks have been able to really manipulate the value of money and will continue to do so. I can't see how that's going to end. So the next question is, what happens if it doesn't crash? And you're going to miss out on any gains. And we can start to quantify that quite easily, can't we? Because we can look over a long period of time and go, well, what gains would you miss? Well, on average, you're going to miss between 8 and 10%. Somewhere between those two. On the stock market, you're going to miss between 8 and 10% a year on average. Now, I don't know if this year's a down year or an up year. Some years you'll make more, some years you'll make less. But that's what you're going to miss on average if you remove yourself from the market. So what should I do? And this is where I said to the chap that I was speaking to, with all of that in mind, it's totally up to you. You know what the risks are, you know what the rewards are, you know what would happen if you got the call wrong, you know your level of certainty when it comes to this call. Maybe you got information I don't have, maybe you process it differently. But the way that I view it is that my plan is to hold these assets for the rest of my life. It very much is. Certainly with the property, this is going to be what pays me well into my retirement, and I'm probably going to hand it down to my kids. My index funds, I'm going to be purchasing the same amount this year as I did last year. I'm going to be dollar cost averaging. So if we have this big crash of 50%, well, I'm going to buy all the way down. And then when it comes back up, I'm going to buy all the way up. And I will average, I would guess, over the next 10 years, 8 to 10%, because that is what capitalism is willing to produce. And you've got to remember, capitalism is finely balanced. There is a reason that the average returns at 8 to 10%, and that is because if it was any more market participants would take place, and they would flood into the market, and then they would drive the price of whatever the product that the company is doing down. For example, like you look at electric cars, Tesla. You look at Tesla, they're doing really, really well, producing loads of electric cars, it's going really, really well. All the other manufacturers plow into that. It's going to be no surprise that competition increases and the cost of these cars starts to come down. And as they start to come down, the profit margins come down. As the profit margins come down, economies of scale come into place. And 8 to 10% is about what businesses can operate on. So there's no surprise that this 8 to 10% is roughly where it's going to be. There aren't many businesses that generate 50% profit or anything like that, because there would be more market participants who would come in and drive that down. 8 to 10%, that's the average return. And let's bear in mind, if it's less, then people will leave the market, and they'll leave the market until companies can make between 8 to 10%. So whether that's being paid out in dividends, or whether that's being paid out as capital appreciation, or the companies are reinvesting it internally or buying back stock, whatever it might be, however they choose to deploy that capital, 8 to 10%. That's where it's going to be. So over the long run, that's my belief, is that the stock market will return 8 to 10%. I think the property market will return a little bit less, and there's a reason behind that, and it's quite a complex one, to be honest. And I might not, in fact, I'm not going to go into it on this video, but I think the property market's more like 6% in the UK. And that, you know, as I said, I'll go into that on a different video. But 8 to 10% for the stock market is going to be about where it is. So what would I do? And this is how I sort of concluded with this chat. Well, I'm just going to continue with my plan. My plan was to buy every month because I don't know what's going to happen. All I do know for certain is that my plan is to build a big portfolio over time, and for that to pay me in dividends, in rent, in capital appreciation, both for the stocks and for the property. Now, if part of that puzzle's missing at any point in time, I can weather that storm. I'm never investing more than I can afford to. So that's my plan. I guess the question is, what do you think you should do? Because I would love to know, so stick it down in the comments. The market's down 8-9% today. What are you going to do? Are you selling your stocks? Or are you going to hold, continue to buy? Are you going to buy an abnormal amount because the market's down? Buy the dip is a very in tune phrase right now. I don't personally believe in buy the dip because we don't know what the dip is. We don't know how far the dip's going to go. So we could buy the wrong bit of the dip. So for me, I'm very much like dollar cost average. I know it's boring. I know it's simple, but that's my plan. And that's the one that I've bought into. And to be honest, it's quite liberating because you can just ignore everything else. The markets are down, brilliant, everything's on sale. The markets are up, great, I'm making money. You can put a positive spin on both of those things, can't you, when you accept that that's the plan. I'm just going to continue doing this. And you can say, if the markets are down, great, everything I buy today is cheaper than I bought it before. If the markets are up, you can go, great, I'm making money. So you have a positive spin on both. The problem is where people have a negative spin on both. The markets are down, oh my God, I'm losing money. The markets are up, oh my God, I should have bought more. And that's a negative spiral of emotions. So guys, let me know in the comments, as I said, what your thoughts are. I'll respond to absolutely every single one of you. I'm Mark Parham, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers guys.